Yo, what is going on, everybody? So, I know it's been a while since I've done a video for you guys, and that's because I've been coming home every night, and by the time I put some charge in my phone, I've fallen asleep, and then when I wake up, I'm like, fuck this, and I go to bed. So I thought that I would do something a little bit different. I thought I would charge my phone before I got home. Yeah, that's right. It looked like I had something on, but it's just part of my beard. Anyway, whatever. I wanted to share a little something with you. Now, there's a lot of talk about Will Smith. There's talk about DJ Academics. There is talk about Kanye West saying he's going to run for president. And all of these things are worthy topics in the manosphere. But I just wanted to do something a little bit different. You see, I sometimes catch things that go completely under the radar. And I caught something the other day that's been brewing since February. Back in February, I'm going to share the photo from February. So I'm going to share the photos and the article from February. And then I'm going to fast forward until now. And I'm going to show you exactly why you should never marry a single mother. And you should never, ever, 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 ever live with a woman in a house that you own. If you own a house, that's fine. If you want to have a relationship with and get serious with a woman, that's fine. Understand the risks. But rent a house that you want to live in with her? Hammerhand! Brother, I have not seen you for ages. You've been over in BitChute, haven't you? You sneaky, sneaky lad. Good to see you. And good to see all of you guys. I appreciate you. It's good to be back. So yeah, don't get married. Well, don't get married to begin with. But if you're going to, don't live in the house that you own. Rent the house that you live in with them. If you're going to cohabit, if you're going to take that risk, but don't live in the house you own. Anyway, I'm not going to rant on anymore. I've made my position on that very clear. Let's get into the article from February so you can get the backstory. Leading Australian neurosurgeon Tim Steele is charged with assaulting his wife as patients reveal they've been left in the dark and told he's on unexpected leave. So he basically was accused of something and just chopped straight away. Just, no, you're not coming to work. See you later. This is a picture of him and his ex-wife, who, by the way, is a single mother. So he was raising somebody else's kid. Poor guy to begin with. Oh, come on. Here we go. So basically, he leads up a particular department, or at least he did. I'm not sure where he's at right now. Leading neurosurgeon's been suspended from practicing as he faces charges for assaulting the wife. Patients claim they've been told he's on unexpected leave. He leads the Department of Neurosurgery at St Vincent's Hospital in Darlinghurst, which is actually quite a prestigious hospital in Sydney, and is accused of assaulting his wife Emma and damaging property during an alleged row at the couple's home in Bellevue Hill Saturday, December 14. For those of you who don't know Bellevue Hill is one of the most expensive suburbs in Sydney. It's got a big Jewish community, and it has most of the trophy homes in Sydney, and it's probably got the highest concentration of trophy homes anywhere in Sydney, I would say. His lawyer, Paul McGurr, told Daily Mail Australia Dr. Steele will be contesting the allegations. Police are currently seeking an apprehended violence order on Mrs. Steele's behalf because under the Duluth model in Australia, if an allegation of domestic violence is made, it is a police requirement that they take out an AVO on behalf of the partner, even if the partner says that she doesn't want to proceed, possibly because she's lying, possibly because she doesn't want him to leave, even though he is abusive. There's all sorts of different situations. But if she says something to the police, they have a legal obligation to charge you with a apprehended domestic violence order. So he notified the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, or APRA, of the charges, and in turn had his license suspended on February 11. So he can no longer practice as a neurosurgeon due to his suspended license, due to these charges. A source close to the hospital told Daily Mail Australia that patients have been left in the lurch about future surgeries. Some patients have been trying to get in touch with him for days, and they've been told he's on unexpected leave. No background for anybody. They seem to be left in the dark about things it's a shambles. St. Vincent's Hospital has been informed of the suspension and will not comment on the matter because it is personal in nature, not professional. That never stopped anyone before. A hearing for one count of assault occasioning actual bodily harm, one count of damaging property, and the AVO application has been scheduled in Downing Centre Local Court for March 6th. Now, when they say AVO application, they mean a DVO, which is an apprehended domestic violence application. By the way, thank you to one of my loyal subs, Daniel Corica, for the $5. Hey brother, here's kangaroo food money, delicious. I will cook some up. And New Era Megtar Monk, $2. Thank you, brothers. I appreciate it. But guys, by the way, if you do want to ask questions in the chat, please drop a super chat and I will answer every single question. Please don't make them too ridiculously outrageous or off topic, because I won't be able to properly cover them and also do justice to this video if that's the case. Right. So fast forward from that article on February 25th that talks about the alleged act of violence back in December last year, and we come fast forward to July 3rd, which is God, this, guys, I don't even know what date it is at this point. Like, this is how ridiculous my life has become. So that was like 3 days ago. It's the 6th today. Millionaire neurosurgeon is cleared of assaulting his wife in the couple's sprawling home, which means it's a massive, expensive home, which no doubt is fully paid off, given that he earns a stupendous amount of money. And I will outline how much he roughly makes in a year as part of this article, because it is detailed. Court hears how she treated him, and I quote, so open quote, she treated him like a human ATM, end quote, and was paid a monthly allowance. Guys, guess how much the monthly allowance this poor victim, and I use that term loosely, I used it in the context of an alleged victim, $24,000 a month. What? But it gets better. It gets better. And speaking of better, Hammerhand, $20 for holding the line, you badass. You damn right I'm holding the line. I am going in deep with this bad boy. The wife of a top Sydney neurosurgeon told police her husband had pulled out her hair extensions. Oh, poor Tiddums. Has she hit the wall and needs extensions, has she? When officers responded to a domestic dispute in their luxury home. In a video filmed with body-worn camera, Emma Steele also claimed Dr. Timothy Steele subjected her, wait for it, subjected her to financial abuse. She gets $24,000 a month and she's accusing the guy of financial abuse. This is the level of insanity. This is the single mother which he brought into her house, lets her live for free, pays for all of the major bills like registration, insurances and stuff, plus he gives her $2.5 to $3 a week for household, just regular household expenses. Just do the groceries. Here's $3,000. And here's $3,000 for yourself. Go do your nails. Go buy a fucking pair of Manolo Blahniks. Go buy yourself a pair of Jimmy Choos. Go get a new dress for $1,000. Do whatever you want. This is your money, tax free. By the way, I worked out that I'll get to that. So this is in Australia. If I don't do as he says, he doesn't pay me, Mrs. Steele told police. But on Thursday, Mrs. Steele's evidence about domestic abuse was rejected by a magistrate who cleared Dr. Steele of assaulting her. Dr. Steele had been accused of punching, slapping and kicking Mrs. Steele the morning after a Christmas party last year. In the video tendered to court, Mrs. Steele told police, "He grabbed my hair, pulled my hair, ripped out my hair extensions. Yeah, the ones he paid for. He's kicking me. He's pushing me. I fell on the floor a couple of times and I was calling out for help." Dr. Steele had faced charges of assault occasioning actual bodily harm, common assault and damaging property, which, as we mentioned before, he was basically restricted from practicing as a neurosurgeon at that point. He was essentially kicked out of the job without his patients even being notified of what was going on, leaving them completely and like neurosurgeon, right? So we're talking like brain surgery. So you got patients that need brain surgery that are being left in the loop because of this. Just think about the enormity of that outcome. Thank you to Stacey J for that donation. I appreciate you. After 4 days of evidence in Downing Centre local court. So this is 4 days of wasted court time. 4 days. Magistrate Vivian Swan found there were inconsistencies in Mrs. Steele's evidence and dismissed all matters. Geez, it must have been some pretty serious inconsistencies to dismiss allegations of domestic assault against a woman in Australia, of all places. Now, to give you a bit of context, right, I'm going to show you the damage, the injuries to Miss Steele's arm, and then I'm going to show you the injuries to Mr. Steele's arm, or should I say Dr. Steele. Much respect to the guy for putting up with her this long. So this was her injury, right? See little bumps, maybe a little bit red, whatever. This was his injury. Compare the pair. Bit of a difference, right? Dr. Steele's solicitor, Paul McGurr, had described Mrs. Steele as a witness of, and I quote, very little credit and I quote, an unhinged person who made up allegations against her husband. In relation to her, she will make up anything to suit herself, Mr. McGurr said. Mr. McGurr being Dr. Steele's solicitor. The catalyst for all this is money. She was treating Dr. Steele like a walking ATM. Yeah, damn right she was. Damn right. The former model's 19-year-old... So here, it gets even juicier at this point. Wait, right, hey, guys, this is the best part. This is my favorite part of this story. I can't even tell you how much I started laughing when I read this part of the story. The former model's, so she was an ex-model. The former model's 19-year-old son from an earlier marriage to jockey Shane Dye also gave evidence against her, describing Mrs. Steele's obsession with money. So her 19-year-old son has thrown his mum under the bus and called her a gold digger. This is why I'm so happy about the upcoming generation being red-pilled. Because they are slaying these thoughts, even if those thoughts are their own mother. Jack Dye said his mother regularly complained Dr. Steele did not give her enough funds, despite being paid an allowance of at least 20,000 Australian dollars every month. As well as making allegations of domestic violence, Mrs. Steele had claimed her husband was having an affair and suggested he had cut up a lacy red pair of her underwear. Dr. Steele was the victim of her vicious attacks, Mr. McGurr said. Poor old Dr. Steele is the one getting his reputation sullied. Emma Steele is a woman who is playing the system and playing the victim. Mr. McGurr... This is what exhaustion does to you, gentlemen. Mr. McGurr referred to the evidence of psychiatrist Dr. Olav Nielsen, who Dr. Steele had consulted in 2017 about problems in his marriage. So he was consulting a psychiatrist 3 years ago. Thank God, by the way, because if he hadn't been consulting a psychiatrist 3 years ago, he might not have had a record of the abuse. Mr. Nielsen, who'd known Dr. Steele since 1988, described him as not an impulsive or aggressive person at all, and one of the most unlikely people to be irrationally violent. Mrs. Steele, in Dr. Nielsen's professional opinion, had a, and I quote, pretty narcissistic and unempathetic personality. Well, gee. Tickle me pink, what a surprise. Dr. Steele had told the court how his work Christmas party descended into police being called to the couple's sprawling Bellevue Hill home the next morning. Mrs. Steele had accused her husband of kicking, punching, and slapping her after he came home intoxicated early one morning last year, allegedly. Keyword, allegedly. Whenever you see an article of something a man's done to a woman where they're being slandered in the media, look for that word allegedly. Just look for that word. The one-time television host alleged her husband, so she was a model and a TV host at one stage, and now she's not. She alleged her husband had been having an affair with his secretary, with whom he was in a hotel room on the night of the Christmas party. Dr. Steele, 56, categorically denied assaulting 41-year-old Mrs. Steele or ever having an affair with the receptionist or anyone else during their marriage. He said that on Friday, December 13th last year, he'd organized a Christmas party at Woolloomooloo's W Hotel for 50 to 60 guests. Now, that's a very exclusive hotel, if any of you know Woolloomooloo, or even that particular hotel. So that's not cheap, right? He's really looking after his staff with that one. It's obviously a Christmas party. I think they mentioned that earlier. Dr. Steele said that morning his wife had been in a bad mood, and while in the shower, she had thrown a wet, fake tanning mitt across the bathroom at him. So she's using the fake tanning mitt to cover up the wall damage, from what I can ascertain. But yeah, she's thrown the wet, fake tanning mitt across the room at him. And she said, "I hate you," Mrs. Steele allegedly said. "Why don't you just leave? Get out!" So what happens when you walk out of your home, leaving the gold digger in your home? Well, usually she ends up getting to keep the home. And I suspect that was exactly the intention. Dr. Steele said so after she's thrown the fake tanning mitt at him, after she's yelled at him, says she hates him, "Why don't you just leave and get out of my house?" He has then gone and performed surgery that day. He's gone and performed brain surgery. And then he went to the W Hotel and threw a Christmas party for his employees. This dude's practically the salt of the earth, from what I can tell. Right? Where he'd paid for drinks and canapes to be served from 6 to 9 p.m. Mrs. Steele arrived at the gathering with the couple's children, sat in an area separate from the main party, and stayed about an hour and a half. Open quote. "She was aggressive, angry, and hostile to me," close quote, Dr. Steele told the court. Open quote, "She would not speak to me and she told me to stay away," end quote. "She did not come anywhere near me. She was rude to my staff." Dr. Steele said he left the party, which had run much later than he'd planned, shortly after his wife tried to call his secretary about 4:20 a.m. Now, this is the practice manager. Oh, God, it's just Botox. This is just a Botox party in her face. This is the practice manager that he's accused of sleeping with. And just to give you guys a bit of a feel, right? This is the back of the house. So it's got a patio with a big sort of lounge area and then a dining area. And keep in mind, in Bellevue Hill, land is insanely expensive. So to have something this wide is not cheap. So it's a nice house. It's quite opulent. There we go. Mrs. Steele has said she confronted her husband while he was in bed about 6 a.m. and reminded him the couple was due at a well-known Rose Bay restaurant at 1 p.m. So he's got about 7 hours to be there, right? So he can have a bit of a nap, get up, get ready, and head off to lunch, where he's obviously going to pay for the meal at a very expensive restaurant. Mrs. Steele said I said to him, "Tim, we're not going to be able to go to lunch with our neighbors at Catalina," Mrs. Steele said. "I was trying to talk to him and getting no response." Mrs. Steele told the court her husband then allegedly attacked her at about 8:45 a.m., assaulting her 4 times with a punch to the head and stomach and a slap to the face. She also accused him of pinning her down and ripping her hair extensions out. After the alleged assault, Dr. Steele had run downstairs and jumped in the pool while holding his wife's phone. Mrs. Steele then called police. Dr. Steele said on Wednesday he'd been sound asleep, face down in bed. Now, this is the real story. This is the real story, not the fake one that the ex-wife made up. He'd been sound asleep, face down in bed, when his wife woke him up by scratching his back and head. I was awoken by severe pain in my back and behind my ears, he said. I was hit about 3 or 4 times. Dr. Steele said his wife screamed at him with accusations he'd been having an affair with his secretary, Angie Turner. He said she told him, and I quote, "You're an effing disgrace. It's disgusting. You've been with Angie," end quote. Oh, sorry, I should have continued that quote. "You were having sex with Angie. I had a private investigator following you. I've got everything I need." So what she was doing, she was trying to call him out on something she thought he was doing to get him to confess to something. She hadn't sent out a private investigator. Otherwise, she'd know nothing had happened, because that nothing from that private investigator actually ended up coming out. So that was just complete bullshit. She was totally gaslighting him, trying to get a confession out of him for something she thought that he'd been doing. And this is the gentleman here, you know, like, I can just tell that this dude's a good guy, you know? He's a good provider. He's a good dad. He's just an all-around decent guy. Like, look, looks can be deceiving, but that's just the feeling I get. And generally my intuition serves me fairly well. I could be wrong. He could be a dick sometimes, but from everything I'm hearing, he's actually a pretty decent guy. And he's tolerated a lot. Dr. Steele said there was a scuffle over a phone he thought was his, but later turned out to belong to his wife. It's an honest mistake. He denied ever hitting or intentionally hurting Mrs. Steele. "My only preoccupation was to get to the phone," he said. "I couldn't understand why she continued to attack me, and my only concern was getting out the door. I had not done what my wife was accusing me of. I just wanted to stop being hit and get away." From the time police arrived at the Steele family home, Dr. Steele maintained he'd only acted in self-defense, and Ms. Swain found nothing to disprove that. Any injuries Mrs. Steele sustained were the result of Dr. Steele protecting himself against an attack by his wife. "I'm satisfied that there is a reasonable possibility that the accused believed his conduct was necessary in order to defend himself," Ms. Swain said. "I'm satisfied that the way in which the scuffle occurred..." They've doubled up on that, but it's slightly differently worded. "I'm satisfied the way in which the scuffle occurred and the injuries that were occasioned to the complainant, that was a reasonable response to this in the circumstances as the accused perceived them." Mrs. Turner told the court she'd never had anything other than a professional relationship with Dr. Steele. Any suggestion she had an affair with him was ridiculous. After the Christmas party, she'd been in a hotel room with Dr. Steele and practice manager Stephanie Jobson. Dr. Steele had paid for the room because Miss Turner lived in Cronulla and Ms. Jobson lived in Wollongong. What a guy, looking after his employees. Ms. Turner was surprised Mrs. Steele had tried to call her about 4:20 a.m. So the wife, the abusive wife, has called the receptionist, right? Because, there was no anger or accusations before this day. It was just because he was out so late that she thought that they were banging. So she wouldn't have had time to get a private investigator together. Anyway, she said to him, she said to her employer, which is Dr. Steele, "I think you need to go," she said of Dr. Steele. He seemed frightened. He seemed very concerned to go home and face Emma because they'd been fighting all night. I think she told him to fuck off at one stage. Ms. Jobson was also asked if she ever had an affair with Dr. Steele. "Absolutely not," she said. Dr. Steele said after the incident with his wife, he'd gone downstairs and jumped in the pool because he was in so much pain. "When I was being attacked and scratched, the whole top half of my body was burning, and so I was looking for something to calm it and put the fire out as such," he said. He believed the phone he had in his hands was his and knew it was water resistant for 30 minutes. Mrs. Steele said red scratch marks across her husband's body shown in photographs tendered to the court were inflicted as she tried to defend herself. Bullshit. Dr. Steele described a troubled marriage and alleged his wife had previously attacked him. She is regularly aggressive, he said, regularly confrontational and regularly demanding. When she is confronted by difficulties, her behavior deteriorates. So basically can't handle any criticism, any accountability, any can't acknowledge in any way if she's ever wrong about anything, which sounds just like a textbook. Certainly verbal abuse is common and verbal denigration is almost constant. Mrs. Steele also claimed she was the victim of ongoing financial abuse. Oh, Diddums, you got 24 grand a month, shut your mouth. I'm not satisfied that this is made out either, the judge said. Mrs. Steele told the court on Tuesday her husband gave her 10 grand a month for personal expenses, 10 grand to run up the household, but sometimes the total sum was up to 24 grand. Household allowance covered costs, including their children's expenses, after-school activities, clothing, and groceries. It did not go towards bills such as rates, utilities, school fees, holidays, motor vehicle expenses, insurance, takeaway food, or restaurant meals. All of that went on Dr. Steele's credit card. She got to keep the rest. The court heard in total Mrs. Steele received, I'm going to tell you the amount after I read the rest, received in regular payment over 7 months last year, which included a top-up of $30,902. She received over 7 months, $175,902. Wow. Mr. McGurr said it was farcical under those circumstances for Mrs. Steele to claim financial abuse. Damn straight it is. I was living within our means of a $4 to $6 million annual salary. Just because your husband's got a $4 to $6 million annual salary doesn't mean you get to spend almost what would be the equivalent of an after-tax income of a $500,000 pre-tax income, roughly. So you would have to be earning $500,000 a year in a job, which would require a hell of a lot of pressure, by the way, in order to get roughly about the same amount in your pocket as your husband is just handing you for having a vagina and living in his house for free. Mrs. Steele claimed here we go. Here's the cracker, right? Because there's this thing, right, where a lot of women say, well, I didn't have the money to leave, and so I couldn't. And maybe if there is an abusive husband, then that's a legitimate excuse, and I can't really fault that argument. Although there are several, well, those dogs are really cute. Although there are several organizations that do help women to get out of abusive relationships and give them money, give them accommodation, help them buy furniture, help them buy appliances. So there's really no excuse for a woman in Australia to stay in a house in which there's an abusive relationship, unless she's so petrified for her life that if she thinks if she leaves, she'll die. That's the only time that in Australia a woman has a legitimate excuse for not leaving, if there's a genuinely abusive relationship. I mean, look, there's some others, but I just can't think of them right now. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right this second. I'm going to continue this article because this is starting to get a bit long, and I'm sorry, guys. I appreciate you all, and if you're in the box right now, smash that thumbs up. Let's get this word out there. She's petrified because of the ongoing abuse, apparently. The judge dismissed the AVO application, finding while Mrs. Steele may hold fears, I'm not satisfied those fears are based on reasonable grounds. She said her husband had always controlled her life and the couple's finances during their 11-year marriage. Throughout my marriage, I've been very controlled and not allowed to go out when I would like to go out, she said. I'm not allowed to live my life under my rules, with his money. It's always been under Tim's rules. On Tuesday, Mr. McGurr asked Mrs. Steele, and guys, don't leave yet because there is a kicker right at the end that is just going to blow your mind. On top of everything you've already seen. He asked if Dr. Steele had paid her $175,902 between June 1 and December 31 last year. I don't know the exact amounts, she said. My husband, Dr. Steele, earns between $4 to $6 million a year. Trying to play off any amount that they've just mentioned as insignificant in the overall scheme of things. That's what she was doing. Mrs. Steele insisted she'd been the victim of financial abuse and that her husband reduced her payments if he was unhappy with her. I would send him a text message begging him to put the regular amount, which was $2,500 a week. That's just for the household expenses, not including her spending expenses. The payments were going in regularly. He was just changing the payments. He would just decrease them if I didn't do what he said. I was bribed, Mr. McGurr. I was bribed. I was a puppet. What? Reduce them to what? $2,000 each instead of $2,500 each? Are you serious? Mr. McGurr questioned why Mrs. Steele could not survive off an allowance of $24,000 a month from her husband. Mrs. Steele said she would have to ask for further funds from her husband, such as $2,500 to buy Christmas presents. A lot of the time he would say, that's your budget and you have to live within your means. He would use the term advance. He would advance me the money. Mr. McGurr asked, this is the kicker, guys. Mr. McGurr asked Mrs. Steele if her husband had deposited an amount of money into her superannuation account in 2017. By the way, that was the year he went to a psychiatrist about marital problems. In addition to that, guys, if you don't know, if you're in America and you don't know what superannuation is, it's basically your 401k, your retirement account. So the solicitor asked Mrs. Steele if her husband had deposited $1.3 million into her superannuation account. That's 1,300, lots of 1,000. That's 1.3 times $1 million. That's a lot of money to be putting into someone's retirement fund. I haven't checked my super account, she said. I don't know what's in my super account. I could log in and have a look. I don't know. You know the $1.3 million is in your account. You just want to act dumb like you didn't know it was there. Like you got caught and you're just trying to dodge and weave. Listen, sweetheart, your son's thrown you under the bus and all of the evidence points to you being a lying, gold-digging that hoe over there. I'm just saying. So Dr. Steele has been unable to practice due to the charges against him. Fingers crossed. I hope and pray, and I'm not a religious man, but I hope and pray that this gentleman is cleared to start practicing again and that she gets her thotty ass kicked out the door of that house ASAP. That would be the best outcome in this instance. I severely hope this guy is not that blue pill that he lets her stay. Fingers crossed. Pray for this guy that he's not a sucker like that. Don't marry a single mum. Don't let her move into your house. That's the moral of the story for this video. Anyway, guys, if you like that video, please consider supporting my channel either via PayPal or checking out Brave browser if you're sick of Chrome or Internet Explorer, or if you got Chrome and you like Chrome but just don't like the fact that your privacy is not very respected. Brave browser operates just like Chrome, but they help me out by swinging me a couple of bucks every time you download and use the browser for more than 30 days. And if you don't like it, just uninstall it. What else was I going to say? Because all my brain's doing is going, oh my God, it's time to get to bed. It's time to go to bed. Which is what time it is. So share this video, smash the thumbs up, leave a comment. Do whatever it is that you do on my videos that helps it get traction, that helps it get out there. Because guys need to know those two things: not to marry single mothers and not to let a woman live in the house that you own, because otherwise they can make one allegation. And if you can't prove it otherwise, after a lengthy court process, in this case, like 5 months or so, something like that, maybe, no, like 6 months, 7 months. Yeah, that's crazy. This dude's been fighting this. So God knows if he's been living in his house or out of his house for all that time. We shall never know, but it's not something that you should put yourself in the position to have happen. Guys, I'm going to go get some sleep because otherwise I'm going to ramble about bullshit for another 10 minutes. But thank you for joining in. Thank you for smashing the thumbs up. Thank you for leaving comments. Thank you for all of your support and just, spreading the word, guys. We are all here for each other. And I'm going to shut my mouth and say peace. And I'll see you in the next video.